Welcome to my first annual TerrorVision. In this I'll be covering 100 years of horror in 31 days. For the first episode I'll be covering The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Released in 1920, this German expressionist film centres around a cabinet that contains the brainwashed Caesar. Controlled by the mad Caligari, who orders him to kill all those he seeks vengeance upon. The theme of a mad doctor using a mindless monster to do his work is something that has been recycled countless times throughout horror. While being one of the first horror films and inspiring a whole genre, this film is also heralded for its surreal visuals and strange story, which is told from the point of view of an inmate in an asylum. This is conveyed through the visual design. Everything we see is distorted, with buildings taking on strange shapes, shadows painted across the floors, and windows stretched at weird angles. I vividly remember being sleep deprived and watching this film in my first year of college, feeling as if I was entering some sort of dream world. These ideas and themes laid the groundwork for all future horror movies to come. The year is 1922, place is Germany, and this is Nosferatu. This was one of the first horror movies to create a classic image of a vampire that's still being used in cinema today. To this day, the film is eerie to watch from start to finish, and the silence just enhances the mood and overall atmosphere. The shots of Nosferatu's shadow creeping up the stairs, along with many others, have been etched into time and stay with you the moment you see them, creating something that's truly timeless. This film's been adapted and remade countless times, but I don't think nothing beats the true eerie feel of the original. After the dark and silent era of horror, we've now moved into the 1930s. With the first sound horror movie, and first of Universal Studios, it's Dracula.
I bid you welcome.
Dracula features all the classic tropes of a horror movie. Spiderwebs, fog, bats, and a dark castle. The highlight of this movie is obviously Bela Lugosi, who plays Dracula. His performance is recognised as the best of all time, with most people doing an impression of him when referring to Dracula. While he wasn't the first, he is recognised as the definitive Dracula. The film has a slow, sort of dreamlike atmosphere due to it being the first sound horror. He didn't think to add any sort of music when there was no dialogue, but this just adds to the creepy tone. A true classic and one of the greats. Following the success of Dracula, Universal Studios decided to make Frankenstein. A classic tale of when a scientist tries to play God and create life. The monster is played by Boris Karloff, a horror legend who's played countless roles. The monster's look is one of the most iconic in all of horror. Designed by Jack Pierce, he had to come up with a design for the movie, as in the original book by Mary Shelley, the description of the monster is pretty vague. This film is responsible for pushing Frankenstein into the mainstream, with many people believing Frankenstein is the monster's actual name, when it's indeed the Doctor's. Another element this movie introduced is the hunchback assistant, which most adaptations followed suit with. The imagery of this film has been copied and reinterpreted countless times, from the lab to the cemetery to the angry mob. And of course, it spawned one of the most iconic lines in all of horror.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
The film has been parodied and had numerous sequels. It's the definition of the term classic. fresh after portraying Frankenstein, Boris Karloff returns to the screen in another all-time classic, The Mummy. When I first saw this movie, I was surprised it's not just a mummy going around killing people, as you spend most of the time seeing the mummy unwrapped, trying to resurrect his mummy princess from the dead. So it can sort of be seen as more of a dark love story. Much like previous Universal horrors, the movie has a hypnotic feel and dark imagery, with some pretty gory scenes for the early 30s. Whilst much of the imagery and look from this classic film has been taken away, replaced with a typical bandaged mummy of today's culture, it's still made an impact within the century of horror. Still in the 1930s with another Universal monster, and this time it's my personal favourite, The Invisible Man. The movie focuses on Jack Griffin, a scientist who manages to turn himself invisible. However, he's unable to turn himself back. At first he tries to find a cure, but he quickly goes mad with the power that invisibility brings him. The highlight here is of course the special effects, which for 1933 are amazing. No computers, just practical effects. I love the character of the Invisible Man, with him being sympathetic yet villainous at the same time. His voice as well is just perfect.
It came to me suddenly. The drugs I took seemed to light up my brain. Suddenly I realized the power I held, the power to rule, to make the world grovel at my feet.
What makes this movie stand out amongst the other Universal monsters is the dark comedy. The concept of invisibility allows for funny scenes within horror, especially with the police officers. The Invisible Man is the perfect classic movie for Halloween. Check it out. Moving into the 1940s now, continuing strong with the Universal monsters. This time it's the Wolfman. The Wolfman is played by Lon Chaney Jr., the son of a horror legend who played many classic monsters. This movie to me has a very memorable atmosphere, especially the scenes in the graveyard and the forest, which are drenched in atmosphere. One thing most audiences won't expect when watching this movie is that there's no transformation scene, or a shot of a full moon, the two most iconic elements from a werewolf movie. However, the film spawned many sequels, laid the foundations for all future werewolf movies. Give it a watch. Continuing into the 1940s now, and there were fewer choices to pick from with it being World War II. But I've chosen to move away from Universal for a moment and gone with the Cat People. Released in 1942, this movie was quite different from many that came before it. The title is quite misleading. You might be disappointed to find out that there is no cat people. The movie takes a different approach with it all being about suspense, deriving from the fear of the stuff you don't see. The film even contains one of the earliest jump scares that many future horror films would build upon over the years. The scene when a bus unexpectedly scares a lady. The bus when it comes into shot even sounds like a panther, catching the audience off guard slightly more. Boss. Welcome back to TerrorVision. So far, we've discussed the classic monsters and gothic horror of the 1930s and 40s. But now, in 100 years of horror, we're entering the 1950s. This was when there was sort of a shift in horror movies. Audiences weren't scared by monsters as much anymore. The horrors they faced in World War II were much more terrifying than anything a screen could depict. This then resulted in a shift towards a more atomic age of horror, with science fiction, monsters born from radiation, and alien invaders horror that was beyond our natural world. So with that in mind, I'm covering a creature from the Black Lagoon. Quite fitting, as this monster is considered the last of the Universal monsters. What I can say about this film is the shots are excellent, especially the underwater scenes that showcase the creature. Much like other horror films, the creature has a love interest, and emerges when scientists go poking around in his lagoon. I think this movie is a perfect entry point into the atomic age of horror, which we'll be delving into next time. Stay tuned. You might be thinking I've skipped ahead with this one, but we're not talking about the 1986 version. We're going with the original. Many people often disregard the original as some form of B-movie, but it's actually quite a good movie that warns about the dangers of science. The story follows a humble scientist who's obsessed with perfecting his teleportation machine. We can see he cares for his family, but he spends most of his time in his basement trying to perfect his craft. However, when he tests it on himself, a fly enters the machine, merging his molecules with the flies. He then has to work on fixing himself. He doesn't just become some fly monster, he is still a person, but he can't communicate with words. His only hope is to capture the fly to try and reclaim his molecules. The movie does a great job of building up suspense, and we only see him as the fly at the very end. I think The Fly stands out from other cheesy monster movies at that time, leaving its mark on the horror genre. The Blob to me is a movie that captures the 50s more than any other film. The whole style and cheesiness of the movie just adds to the charm. It has all the tropes of a classic sci-fi. A meteor falling to Earth, a group of young teens who try to warn the town, but nobody believes them until it's too late. And yes, that is Steve McQueen. This was one of the first movies that actually featured primarily young actors as the stars, instead of the old, established actors. But the highlight of the movie is the blob itself. The effects are pretty cool for the time, all done practically. And I love the techno-colour that the blob is shot in, adding to its extraterrestrial feel. While this movie may not be for everybody, with many people, myself included, preferring the 1988 remake, there was always a place for the cheesy "the" movies in horror. Check it out and beware the blob.
Beware of the blob, it creeps and leaps and glides and slides across the...
As we move into the 1960s, many horrors that came before focused on the supernatural, vampires, and otherworldly creatures, but Psycho focuses on the horror that's just down the road, the horror of what lies within the mind. And of course features one of the most iconic scenes not in horror, but in all of cinema. It was shocking and ahead of its time, killing off the main character early, and using unique editing that many modern slashers would use to this day. Alfred Hitchcock was, and still is, the master of suspense. He even told the theatre to refuse entry for late arrivals, as they would have been confused to where Janet Leigh was. A true legend. To truly fully talk about Psycho, you have to break down the full plot of the movie, which includes all the spoilers, which is something I'll definitely cover another time, but for now, check it out and you'll be in for a treat. Welcome back to TerrorVision. As we move through 100 years of horror, we're beginning to see a shift within the genre. In the 60s, horror is starting to get more shocking and violent. Then enters Night of the Living Dead. Directed by George A. Romero, the Of the Dead movies are among my personal favourites, for their gruesome effects, social commentary, and their exploration of human nature. In 1968, audiences had never seen such graphic gore, flesh being eaten, zombies being killed. I've always seen this movie as sort of the beginning of modern horror. It was one of the last films to be screened to a wide range of audiences, as after the film's release, the rating system came into effect, meaning you probably had some teenagers scared shitless at the time. The movie broke down lots of stereotypes, featuring a black man in the lead role, which was uncommon for the time. This independent movie broke through and became a worldwide hit, giving audiences a taste of something they hadn't seen before. The true grandfather of zombie movies.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Yeah, we're getting into it now. The Exorcist is the epitome of a horror movie. Breaking into the mainstream and becoming a legend within cinema. Growing up as a kid, I could never bring myself to watch it, as people always described it as the scariest movie ever made. I only saw glimpses and images, just adding to its mystique. In 1973, this movie had no equal. The effects and imagery are truly what steal the show, with most of them being a bit too much to show. They're probably best left to experience for first-time viewing. While it may not hit the same in a modern age, to me, I can't help but feel it leaves you with something. It leaves you with a lingering question of if pure evil really does exist, and if there is such thing as a devil. And if there's one thing that The Exorcist does leave you with, it's that face burnt into your mind. Welcome back to TerrorVision. As we've reached the halfway point in our 100 years of horror, the 1970s is a time where we see more low-budget and exploitation films being produced. These are movies that are solely made just to shock the viewer, with single selling points such as sex and violence. These types of movies are best watched late at night, and that's when they're often shown. This leads us to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the ultimate horror film. What I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre does best is combine many factors of horror to scare the viewer, from the old grainy look to the isolation of the characters and the realistic feel, with that opening narration giving it a documentary feel, as if you stumbled upon something that shouldn't be viewed and actually happened. The Sawyer family all come across as disturbing in their own way, giving a feeling that you can't trust anyone you come across. I love how the movie is paced. It builds and builds tension until it finally peaks with the final chase, and that iconic final scene with Leatherface swinging his chainsaw in the sunset is a perfect lasting image. What I think sums up Texas Chainsaw Massacre is there's nothing supernatural. It's just about psychopaths that could very well be out there waiting. With the rise of independent movies came the ultimate success story. With such a low budget, nobody expected it to become one of the most successful horror franchises of all time. And to me, it became the big three of horror movie franchises and turned Michael Myers into a household name. Many people consider this to be the first slasher and to have brought the subgenre to the forefront. While there were many movies that came before that had the slasher stereotypes, Halloween was the first to contain a stereotype of a mysterious killer stalking a main character and killing off the cast one by one. until there was one final girl. I have to say this movie is a master of suspense and tension, with that music being probably the most recognisable in all of horror. I especially love the supporting characters of Dr. Loomis and Laurie Strode, something most slasher movies lack. But of course the main attraction is Michael Myers. With that white William Shatner mask, he's become one of the faces of horror movies, with the series just not being able to put him down, and I don't think it ever will. Alien is what happens when you put a slasher movie in space. Much like Halloween, the movie is a body count, but the only difference is that the killer is an extraterrestrial life form. The plot is simple to follow. A ship returning to Earth picks up a signal from a nearby planet, and you have to go down to investigate. The alien gets loose on the ship and starts killing the crew. It sounds simple and cliche, but it's done so well it feels brand new. That scene where the faceover first jumps out always stuck with me. The way it bursts out of John Hurt. A bit of cool behind the scenes detail is that the cast were not told this was going to happen. They just knew that it would appear, so their reactions would have been genuine. Again, like Halloween, the movie ends with Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver. Unlike most typical final girls who run and scream, Ripley is hard as fuck, and shows that women can be just as macho in these films, breaking boundaries in that department. True classic and a perfect blend of horror sci-fi. We've made it to the 80s and maybe the best decade of horror. But the slasher genre is in full effect. Friday the 13th is essentially a copycat movie of Halloween, with similar shots. But I think what sets it apart is its lore and the effort they put into the kills. The effects were done by Tom Savini, an absolute legend of horror, who went above and beyond for every effect he worked on, the most memorable being the arrow through the neck of Kevin Bacon. The lore and the setting, I think, make the movie memorable. The campground gave it a feel of a killer watching you from behind any tree. There's also an urban legend feel to these movies, which I think made them stand out, with the story of Jason being one that sticks with you, like retelling an old legend. Of course, in this movie, Jason isn't the killer, it's his mother Pamela, making it a great subversion for those going blind into the series. Not the greatest movie of all time, but it was the first chapter in one of the big three horror movie franchises. If you wonder who the big three are I keep mentioning, well, it's Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, and well, we'll cover him next time. Welcome back to TerrorVision, and now the greatest horror villain of all time, Freddy Krueger. A Nightmare on Elm Street has to be the most creative horror movie of all time. A killer that attacks you in your dreams, and if you die in the dream, you die in real life. But of course, the most iconic part of these movies is Freddy Krueger himself. Every part of him is memorable. The jumper, the hat, and of course the glove. Unlike Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, Freddy has a face. He talks, and he's got his own distinct personality. While a part of the slasher craze, Nightmare stands out by pulling a twist on the typical tropes and adding a touch of dark humour. Dream scenes allow for endless creativity within the franchise, making these movies stand out for their surreal experience. The original Nightmare is a near-perfect horror movie, and of course you can't forget the man who actually played Freddy, Robert Englund, who portrayed him in every instalment up until the remake, making him a true legend of horror and helping these movies leave their mark in the 100 years.
Please, God. This is God.
is probably the best horror movie ever made. Every aspect that makes up a horror movie is covered and done so well. The fear of isolation, the fear of the unknown, the unease and distrust of a fellow man. The movie centres around a group of scientists in a remote location in Antarctica, where a dog is being shot at for unknown reasons. The group take the dog in when they discover it's actually a creature that can take the form of its victims. A brilliant concept. Kurt Russell plays a resourceful helicopter pilot who leads the crew in a desperate battle to try and uncover and kill the creature before it picks them all off one by one. The premise allows for nail-biting scenes where the viewer has no idea which of the crew has been assimilated, literally giving us as much knowledge as the group themselves. John Carpenter intentionally made the process of when and how people got assimilated confusing, so that you can never truly trust anyone. And of course, it has the best special effects of any horror movie ever. Genuinely grotesque, yet creative at the same time. The scene with the defibrillator will be burned into my mind forever. There is so much to say about this movie, and I'll probably do a standalone video on it in the future, so I'll go into more detail there. But all you need to know is this film rules, and it's worth a watch. The killer doll is a trope that was popularised with child's play. Released in 1988, the film revolves around a kid who gets a new doll, Chucky, and he keeps telling his mum the doll is talking to him. What I like about child's play is the psychological element. You never see the doll come to life until the very end. So for the first half, there's always this doubt if the child is actually telling the truth. However, the intro to the movie flat out explains how the criminal transferred his soul into the doll, so it kind of takes away from the suspense. While the living doll trope was done before in other movies, child's play pushed Chucky to the forefront, turning him into a memorable slasher villain to add to the collection of horror icons. I do distinctly remember when I was really young, my brother was flicking through channels late at night, and this scene played for a few seconds.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Being around 7 or 8, it scared the shit out of me. Looking back now, this movie is nowhere near as scary as most people think, with each sequel just getting more ridiculous and comical. It's worth a few laughs, check it out.
You stupid bitch, you filthy slut! Did you fuck with me?
Moving into the 1990s now with Stephen King's two-part TV movie, It. It is probably the most famous and popular of Stephen King's stories, depicting the most famous scary clown in horror. But the movie isn't really about a killer clown, it's about a group of kids who all share a fear of It. And It is an interdimensional being that takes the forms of children's fears to prey upon them, and eventually devour them. Such a creative idea allows for many horror scenarios to take place. While the original It isn't as scary as most people remember, I think it's the story and the characters that more people identify with. It's got that Stephen King feel to it, much like Stand By Me. And of course, the story switches between a group of kids who are facing it for the first time, and then later on when they're adults. They realise It comes back every 27 years, so they get back together to finally kill it. I think the scenes when they're adults can be a bit boring and slow, which is what a lot of people criticised about the sequel remake, in that the story is much more enjoyable when it's through the perspective of the kids. But of course, the one who stands out is Tim Curry as It. I can see why so many people find him creepy in this movie, effectively pushing the fear of clowns into the mainstream. Not as great as many people remember, but it has truly left its place within 100 years of horror. As horror entered the 1990s, audiences had become accustomed to the tropes and cliches that came with the genre. They knew what to expect, but then came along Scream. Directed by Wes Craven, who established himself with Nightmare on Elm Street, he set out to end the slasher tropes. In the 90s, counterculture was on the rise, and this movie couldn't have come at a better time. Scream is self-aware, with the characters themselves explaining and understanding the slasher tropes. Even with Ghostface the Killer, I think he was made to be cliché, with his design just being a simple ghost mask found in a common Halloween costume. This gives the audience and characters the idea the killer could be anyone they know. And I think this movie kicked off the resurgence of teen horror movies within the 2000s. But while many of them aren't very good, you can't deny the impact Scream had within horror. The Blair Witch is an interesting one. Unlike many horror films that came before it, The Blair Witch managed to capture this feel of realism and mystery, mainly due to the excellent marketing of the film. This ranged from handing out missing person posters of the actors at film festivals, creating a website in the early days of the internet that featured footage and journals claiming the actors to be missing. Seriously, a lot of people genuinely thought this movie was real footage of teenagers who got lost in the woods. While this movie wasn't the first found footage film, it brought the genre into the mainstream. The story centres around 3 teenagers who enter the woods to create a documentary about the mythical Blair Witch, only to find themselves lost and encountering unexplained supernatural moments. I think what the Blair Witch does best is play upon things you don't see. We're never shown anything you'd expect from a typical horror. It's so raw and gritty that it feels like you're watching people succumb to this unnatural force. While watching it now can kind of feel underwhelming, considering we've been desensitised by media. You got to transport yourself back to 1999 and imagine seeing this for the first time. It would have been something completely fresh. This small movie made a huge impact in 100 years of horror. We've now moved into the 2000s. I find this to be a bit of a low point for horror, specifically Western horrors, with a lot of focus on found footage due to the Blair Witch Project's success, crappy slashers, and the rise of gore, aka torture porn. The key starting point for this was Saw. While the franchise does turn into glorified torture porn, the first Saw movie is quite unique. It's more of a murder mystery story. The plot focuses on 2 men who are chained to pipes in a filthy bathroom. A dead body lies in the middle of the room with them, and they quickly discover they've been captured by a sadistic killer named Jigsaw, and they must complete his game to live. While this is happening, we get many flashbacks showing his previous victims and revelations of the plot. Jigsaw has become a bit of a horror icon, especially Billy the Doll. Jigsaw's motivations, while interesting, remain inconsistent throughout the franchise, but here I think it works quite well. His motivations are to teach victims the value of their lives before forcing them to confront their own morality, and if they survive, they tend to carry his lessons to others. The film has some pretty intense scenes, and a great twist at the end. While the sequels become more and more convoluted, the original is worth a watch. The Grudge is an American remake of Japanese horror classic Ju-On. The movie follows an American nurse in Tokyo who becomes ensnared in a supernatural curse born from a brutal tragedy, dooming all that enter her home to be stalked by the ghostly Keiko. The movie creates an oppressive atmosphere and features an unsettling sound design, with that famous guttural croak.
You stop it.
The movie creates unbearable tension. with shadows seeming like they're alive. And the jump scares, while frequent, do manage to catch you off guard. While some viewers found the plot a bit disjointed, its haunting visuals and minimal gore for the time made it a box office hit, and a defining entry in 2000's supernatural horror. As we moved into the 2010s, the horror genre became more self-aware than ever. With the rise of social media, horror movies were desperately in need of something fresh. Then came along The Cabin in the Woods. From the title, you'd expect the most cliché movie of all time, but far from it. The Cabin in the Woods is a horror fan's horror movie. The less you know with this one, the better. In this movie, each of the characters is specifically designed to represent a stereotype of horror. The girl next door, the popular bitch, the jock, the nerd, and the stoner. As the film goes on, you realise that this is all intentional. So right, from now on, spoiler alert, go watch the movie. As it turns out, the cabin is part of a science experiment that is controlling everything that goes on. And the scientists in the film are very funny. They have such a dry sense of humour, treating the situation as if it's just a normal day on the job. The film truly becomes a horror fan's dream within the last half. We delve into the depths of the facility, seeing how many iconic faces you can see and spot. They even managed to sneak a few infected from Left 4 Dead in there for any fans of Valve's FPS classic. Truly a celebration of a horror franchise. Check it out and you won't be disappointed. Sinister is a dark and unnerving blend of supernatural horror and a true crime mystery. According to the Science Scare study, it was determined to be the scariest horror movie ever made. Ethan Hawke plays a struggling true crime writer who moves his family into a home where a grisly murder took place. His discovery of a box of Super 8 films, each depicting a family's horrific demise, sets off a slow descent into obsession and terror. The director, Scott Derrickson, crafts an oppressive atmosphere that builds through eerie visuals, unsettling silence, and a droning score by Christopher Young that seems to hum with menace. The grainy and home movie aesthetic of the murders is particularly disturbing, lending the film a raw edge that sticks with you. While the scares rely on jump moments, the real horror comes from the creeping realization of the evil at work, and the inevitability of its cycle. It's a chilling, well-placed nightmare that stands out as one of the most memorable supernatural horror movies of the 2010s. Welcome back to TerrorVision. Conjuring, directed by James Wan, is a slow burner of a supernatural, blending classic haunted house chills with an almost documentary-like seriousness. Based on the real-life case files of paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, their film follows their efforts to help a family who are terrorised by the malevolent presence. James Wan avoids cheap gore, instead relying on precise camera work and oppressive tension, with a memorable scene being the clap game. The period setting feels authentic, and the performances are quite grounded. The pacing is also good, allowing the horror to escalate naturally. This makes the final act a bit more intense. The Conjuring not only revitalised the horror house genre, but cemented itself as a modern horror classic. It even spawned a whole cinematic universe, much like the MCU, harkening back to the connected universe of the Universal monsters. finally made it to 100 years of horror. While there are many great horrors to pick from the 2020s, I've gone with 2021's Black Phone. Directed by Scott Derrickson, it's a tense and atmospheric blend of supernatural horror and a gritty coming-of-age thriller. Set in the late 70s, it follows a 13-year-old boy, Finney, who is abducted by a sadistic mass killer known as the Grabber. He's trapped in a soundproof basement, but he begins receiving calls on a disconnected black phone from the killer's past victims, each offering cryptic advice to help him escape. Derrickson masterfully balances the bleak realism of child abduction with eerie spiritual encounters, creating a story that's sort of emotionally resonant as well as unsettling. The period details, muted colour palette, and haunting score immerse the viewer in a world that feels both nostalgic and nightmarish. While it delivers solid scares, I believe the film's real strength lies in the themes of resilience, trauma, and the courage to face pure evil, making it stand out in modern supernatural horror. I believe true great horror movies reflect the time period in which they're made. Black Phone does this really well. In today's age, people tend to reflect on nostalgia and dealing with tragedy with dark comedy. With many modern horrors of the world quickly being turned into memes, Black Phone touches upon disturbing themes of child abduction while balancing dark comedy featuring strong themes of nostalgia. One of the recent great horror movies. Check it out. As we wrap up my first annual TerrorVision, I thought for the Halloween special and final review, I'd cover one of, if not the greatest horror movies of all time, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. This will be a little longer than my previous reviews, as there's just so much to talk about with this movie. Since its release in 1980, it's been shrouded in mystery, drenched in theories and dissected frame by frame. Like The Overlook itself, the film seems to pull you in, whisper to you, daring you to look closer. But, as the film warns us, looking too close might just drive you insane. The story centres around Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson. He's a struggling writer and recovering alcoholic, who takes a job as a winter caretaker at the isolated Overlook Hotel. His wife Wendy, played by Shelley Duvall, and his young son Danny accompany him. At first, the job seems simple enough, just look after the place while it's snowed in. But during Jack's interview, he's told about a former caretaker who went insane one winter and ended up murdering his family. It's a subtle warning, but Kubrick turns that simple premise into a descent into madness unlike anything seen before. Kubrick's genius lies not just in the story, but in how it's told. Every frame feels deliberate, mathematical, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. The symmetrical compositions, the long steady shots, the eerie silences, they all contribute to a sense of unease that just never lets up. Kubrick understood something fundamental about horror. It's not just about what you see, but what you feel. The Overlook Hotel isn't haunted in the usual sense of ghosts. It's oppressive. It's like sterile. The carpet patterns twist your eyes, the hallways stretch longer than they should, the camera seems to glide in ways that just defy physics. The result? You never feel safe. You're constantly aware that just something isn't right, even before anything scary happens. Even the performances feed that tension. Jack doesn't just slowly descend into madness, he's a man already teetering on the edge. And the hotel simply permits him to fall. Shelley Duvall, who was often criticised at the time, delivers one of the most raw and believable portrayals of terror ever captured on film, with Kubrick famously pushing her to emotional extremes, and it shows. At its core, The Shining is about isolation, physical, emotional and psychological. The snow traps the Torrance family inside, but we're already isolated long before that. Jack's resentment towards his family, his creative frustrations, and his alcoholism, all of it fester in a vast, echoing emptiness, Kubrick uses the hotel as a metaphor for Jack's mind. It's grand, impressive, but filled with dark corners, old ghosts, and endless repetition. The phrase, all work and no play make Jack a dull boy, become more than a creepy reveal. It's a statement on obsession. The act of writing or trying to create something meaningful becomes a loop. Madness disguised as productivity. Danny, on the other hand, represents a kind of spiritual sensitivity through his shining, a psychic gift that lets him see the hotel's dark past. It becomes the audience's connection to the supernatural. His imaginary friend Tony might be a coping mechanism, or something far more sinister. Kubrick never tells us. That ambiguity is key. The horror isn't in what we see, it's in not knowing what's real. And then there's the mythology. Few films have inspired as many wild theories as The Shining. Entire documentaries like Room 237 have been made just to explore them. Some even claim it's Kubrick's coded confession he helped fake the moon landing, citing the Apollo 11 sweater Danny wears and the symbolic launch of the ball rolling towards him in the hallway. Others interpret it as an allegory of the genocide of Native Americans, pointing to the imagery of the hotel's decor and a line about it being built on an Indian burial ground. Still, others argue that it's about the Holocaust, or the nature of evil itself. Now, whether Kubrick intended any of this is debatable. He was famously secretive about his meanings, often refusing to explain them. The Shining becomes a mirror. It reflects whatever fears, obsessions, or interpretations we bring to it. In a way, the conspiracy theories are just extensions of the film's madness. The deeper you look, the more the maze twists. One of the most overlooked aspects of The Shining is its sound design. The droning synths, the sudden shrieks of violins, and the rhythmic heartbeat of Danny's tricycle echoing through the halls. It's like the hotel itself is alive. Even moments of silence feel deafening. Kubrick also manipulates space. The geography of the hotel doesn't make sense. Windows appear where they shouldn't. Hallways lead to nowhere. And the infamous hedge maze outside mirrors the mental maze within. These spatial inconsistencies are deliberate, designed to distort the audience. You can't trust what you're seeing, and that's the point. By the time we reach the finale, Jack, frozen in the snow, his deranged face locked in a scream, we realise the story isn't over. The final shot shows a photo, dated 1921, with Jack standing among the guests of a long ago party. The implication? He's always been there. The hotel has absorbed him, claimed him, as it has claimed countless others. In my opinion, it's a perfect ending. Haunting and deeply unsettling. The horror doesn't end when the credits roll. It lingers with you. Like the Overlook itself, it stays with you. So what makes The Shining so terrifying? It's the atmosphere. The sense that you're witnessing something profound. Something that just can't be explained. It's a film that rewards obsession, but punishes it at the same time. Like the hotel, it invites you in, but you may never find your way out. So that's it. 31 movies over 31 days, and the end to my first season of TerrorVision. This has been something I've always wanted to do, and while I found it quite time consuming, it's been something I can truly say I'm proud of. And as I improve and get better at making content like this, I hope to continue it in the future, and make it a sort of yearly series. After October, I'll be moving back to my usual monthly video schedule. But for now, happy Halloween, and thank you for watching.